There is a moment, if you're lucky enough to experience it, when a shadow sweeps across the ground, and you look up, and there it is. A forked tail, a russet body, effortless, ancient, alive. This is the red kite, and the fact that you can see it today is one of the greatest wildlife stories Britain has ever told.
So what exactly are we looking at?
The red kite, Milvus milvus, is a medium to large bird of prey in the family Accipitridae, which it shares with eagles, buzzards, and harriers. Adults typically measure between 60 and 66 centimeters in length, with a wingspan that can stretch up to 185 centimeters, nearly 2 meters from tip to tip. But here's the thing. Despite that impressive wingspan, red kites are relatively light birds, weighing only around 800 grams to 1.3 kilograms. That lightness is the secret to their mastery of the air. The forked tail is the red kite's signature. No other British raptor has one quite like it, and the bird uses it like a rudder, constantly twisting and adjusting as it reads the wind. Watch one long enough, and you'll start to notice it's almost never still. The plumage is a patchwork masterpiece. Rusty red body, pale grey head, streaked with dark lines. Creamy white patches on the underwings, framed by black wingtips. Up close, it's a bird of extraordinary detail. Both sexes look similar, though females are slightly larger, as is common in birds of prey. Young birds are a little paler and more streaky than adults, and it takes a couple of years for them to develop their full breeding plumage. Red kites are opportunistic feeders, and that's actually a polite way of saying they're not fussy. They are predominantly scavengers. Carrion, the carcasses of dead animals, makes up a significant part of their diet, particularly in winter. But they'll also take earthworms, and lots of them. After rain, you can often see kites low over fields, picking worms off the surface with remarkable precision. They'll eat small mammals, insects, and even raid the nests of other birds for eggs or chicks. They're also notorious thieves, in the best possible way. Kites have been documented snatching food from other birds mid-air, and historically, they were well known for stealing scraps from medieval towns. Shakespeare even wrote about them, warning Londoners to watch their handkerchiefs. Breeding season runs from March through to June. Red kites are monogamous and often return to the same nest, called an eyrie, year after year. The nest is a bulky structure of sticks, lined with grass, and famously decorated with all kinds of rubbish. Plastic bags, rags, paper. Scientists think this may signal fitness to a mate or simply be a quirk of their magpie-like curiosity. Females typically lay 2 to 3 eggs. Incubation lasts around 31 to 32 days, shared between both parents. The chicks fledge at around 45 to 50 days, though they'll remain dependent on their parents for several more weeks after that. Red kites begin breeding at around 2 years old, and in the wild, they can live for 25 to 26 years, though most live considerably shorter lives. To understand how remarkable the red kite's story is today, you need to understand how close it came to disappearing entirely. For centuries, red kites were a common sight across Britain. In medieval London, they were actually protected, functioning as urban scavengers, cleaning the streets of offal and waste. Killing one was a criminal offense. But attitudes changed. By the 18th and 19th centuries, kites were being relentlessly persecuted, shot, trapped, and poisoned by gamekeepers and farmers who saw them as a threat to livestock and game birds. Their eggs were collected by enthusiasts. Their habitat was shrinking. By the early 20th century, The red kite had been wiped out entirely from England and Scotland. The entire British population was reduced to a small, isolated group in the hills of mid-Wales, perhaps as few as a dozen breeding pairs at their lowest point. For decades, a small group of dedicated conservationists, many of them local Welsh farmers, quietly protected this last remnant population. They guarded nests. They watched for poisoners. They kept the flame alive. It worked. The Welsh population slowly grew, but the birds were genetically isolated, inbreeding, and restricted to a tiny range. Something more dramatic needed to happen. The red kite nearly vanished from these islands. For generations, children grew up in a Britain without them. And then, through patience, dedication, and a refusal to give up, they came back. Every time you see one now, that russet flash, that forked tail cutting the sky, you're seeing the result of decades of work by people who believed that what was lost could be found again. Not bad for a scavenger who steals washing. In 1989, the RSPB and the Nature Conservancy Council, now Natural England, launched one of the most ambitious bird reintroduction programs in British history. Red kites were sourced from the still healthy Spanish and Swedish populations and brought to England and Scotland. The first releases took place in the Chilterns in England and the Black Isle in Scotland. 6 birds here, a handful there. What happened next exceeded almost every expectation. The birds thrived, they bred, their offspring spread. Populations seeded into new areas: Yorkshire, Northamptonshire, County Down in Northern Ireland, the East Midlands. Today, the UK is home to an estimated 4,000 to 6,000 red kites, and the population is still growing. In some places, like the Chilterns and parts of Wales, kites have become so numerous they're almost a daily sight. Communities have come to treasure them. Feeding stations draw hundreds of birds at a time. Tourism, built around the red kite, pumps millions of pounds into local economies. It is, by any measure, one of the great conservation success stories of the modern era. But it hasn't been without challenges. Illegal poisoning, usually from rodenticides or targeted poison baits, remains the single biggest threat. Every year, kites are found dead from intentional or accidental poisoning. It's a crime, and it's still happening. Lead poisoning from spent ammunition in carcasses is also a serious concern. Kites feeding on shot deer or rabbits can ingest lethal levels of lead fragments, invisible but deadly. So, where can you go to see a red kite? The good news is, more places than ever. The Chiltern Hills in Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire remain arguably the easiest place in England to see them. Drive almost anywhere in the area, and you're likely to spot one overhead within the hour. The Gigrin Farm feeding station in Rudder, mid-Wales, is an unmissable experience. Hundreds of kites descending at feeding time is a spectacle you won't forget. In Scotland, the Galloway Kite Trail and sites around Aberfoyle are excellent. Yorkshire, Northamptonshire, and the East Midlands now have healthy populations too. In fact, kites have even been spotted from time to time over central London. If you want to help, there are real things you can do. Report any suspected poisoning to the RSPB or police wildlife crime officers immediately. If you're a landowner or shoot, consider switching to non-lead ammunition. Alternatives exist, and they work. Support organizations like the RSPB, the Welsh Kite Trust, and your local wildlife trust. And honestly, just watching, paying attention, telling people about what you've seen. Every person who falls in love with a red kite becomes part of this story.
Oh, and one more thing.
Red kites are kleptomaniacs. If you're having a picnic in the Chilterns, hold on to your sandwiches.